Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to provide a brief diplomatic briefing on the news that Xi Jinping will not be attending the G20 summit. It is clearly a blow to the summit, as a lot was expected from Xi Jinping's visit. Two of the most important things that we thought would happen was a potential bilateral between Xi Jinping and Biden, which could perhaps bring down the temperature between these two countries and the talk that we are heading towards a Cold War 2.0. And the second thing was the same, that Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi would also have a meeting and move forward from the conversation that they had in Johannesburg. But before I proceed, please subscribe to Khanversations, like the video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with a lot of others in your network. I also want to share with you that Khanversations a couple of weeks ago passed 5 million views. So thank you very much for all of you, especially those who watch Khanversations regularly and also engage with me and criticize me and advise me. I really appreciate it. All your comments, I read most of them and try to respond to many of them. I also want to thank a few of you who have actually joined and become members of Khanversations. I encourage more of you to support Khanversations by trying to become a member. All you have to do is to go and press the join button, and it will give you 4 options, and you can pick any one of them to support Khanversations. So coming to the issue at hand, G20 is going to become basically G18 because two of the 3 most powerful countries, Russia and China, their leaders are not attending. We already knew that Vladimir Putin would not be there, and in his stead, his foreign minister Lavrov would be attending. And now we have heard the news that Xi Jinping of China may also skip G20, and instead of him, his premier Li Qiang will be attending the summit. It will clearly take away the glamour of the event, no doubt, since there would have been a lot of anticipation in who are the people with whom Xi Jinping will have bilaterals. Will there be a bilateral between Modi and Xi Jinping, between Biden and Xi Jinping? So all of those questions have been put to rest. Joe Biden actually expressed a wish that Xi Jinping would attend G20, and it is possible that there are some behind the scenes discussions going on between the United States and China. And I think if a bilateral can be arranged, it is quite possible that Xi Jinping might change his opinion and position and come to India after all. But nevertheless, as of now, that is just speculation on my behalf, because there was a lot of talk in the United States as to how, given the fact that first Blinken, then Yellen, then Raimondo, all these members of the US cabinet had visited Beijing, and perhaps this was leading to a one-on-one, face-to-face meeting between Biden and Xi Jinping. For the last few months, the speculation was that they would either meet in India or at the Asia Pacific Forum in San Francisco. So it's quite possible that if the US and the Chinese are able to come to an understanding that they can have a bilateral between the two leaders, it's quite possible Xi Jinping might change his mind. But I don't know for sure, and at the moment it seems quite unlikely. So let's look at what it means. Besides the fact that there won't be exciting bilaterals that nerds like me were looking forward to in terms of diplomacy and geopolitics. So the question arises, why is Xi Jinping skipping G20? This is one of the most important global forums. This is where a lot of policy decisions are made about how to manage the global economy. One reason could be that since the war in Ukraine has started, Western powers led by the United States have tried to do to G20 what China and Russia are doing to BRICS, which is taking groups of countries which had come together for geo-economic reasons and converting them into geopolitical institutions. So while G20 was created to balance and stabilize the global economy after the economic crisis of 1999 and so on, and BRICS was created essentially to develop these non-Western global South economies, which are moving at a faster pace, including Russia. So, but since the Russia-Ukraine war started, the United States has been using every forum essentially to bring about support for Ukraine and keep the Ukraine agenda as number one and undermine Russia and try to defeat Russia, or at least politically and economically isolate Russia, weaken it so it loses the war to Ukraine. And so basically the West and the US have been trying to convert G20 into a UN Security Council without vetoes. And China and Russia tried to do the same and make it a geopolitical, especially it was quite apparent in the Johannesburg summit that got over just last week. So it is possible that that could have been one of the reasons why Xi Jinping decided not to come, because he would have to essentially provide a counterfoil to the United States' effort to make Ukraine again the most important issue in the Delhi summit. And it would be China, in the absence of Putin, basically Xi Jinping, who would be trying to block that and raise other issues. But anyway, the first reason that people are the analysts who are talking about this are suggesting that one reason why Xi Jinping is not coming to Delhi is because he's trying to undermine India. For India, this would be a crowning moment. If you remember, even I did shows about how India was becoming a global power, and G20 and SCO summits in India would have G20 and SCO summits in India were raising India's international and global profile, and a successful G20 with some major global policy decisions taking would have elevated India. And the fact that India is trying to bring its own agenda as a voice of the global South to the G20 discussions was also going to raise India's profile as a global leader speaking for the global South. So it appears that some people think that China, in order to undermine India's growing stature in the international arena, is basically undermining G20. Some people actually think this is a payback for India undermining the SCO summit by downgrading it from an in-person two-day event to a Zoom meeting for a couple of hours. SCO is considered as China's NATO or China's G7. And India, who's member of that and was host of SCO on July 4th, essentially completely reduced the stature of SCO. But so some people feel that it is quite possible that China is retaliating by undermining G20. It is also possible that the tensions that have arisen in the last 1 week after China published a new map of the country where it includes territories from Ladakh as well as Arunachal Pradesh and shows them as if they belong to China, has raised the temper and tension between India and China. So the possibilities of any progress on the LAC issue after the somewhat positive meeting in Johannesburg was basically killed, I guess, by China's map. And so Xi Jinping thinks there's no point in going to Delhi because there's going to be no progress in trying to thaw the tensions between China and India, which have been going on since 2020, since the Galwan episode, where China essentially crossed the Indian border and 20 Indian soldiers were killed. So that is one theory that is going around, that China is trying to put pressure on India. So this whole talk about the maps, not coming to G20, undermining India as a global leader. China already showed at Johannesburg that India is not the leader of the global South. China is. China got what it wanted. It wanted to expand G20. It wanted Iran in. It got in some of the very close friends of Russia and China have been included in the global south. In fact, the Johannesburg BRICS summit highlighted two things: that perhaps Russia and China are now closer than India and Russia. And number two, that perhaps China has more influence on the global south than India. The third theory that is floating around, and I don't know how much credence to give to this theory, but there are some who feel that Xi Jinping is nervous that he would have been insulted if he came to India, by India. And in order to avoid being insulted by India, Xi Jinping chose to preempt that by not coming. And what do we mean by insult? Is this basically what happened in Johannesburg? Is that the president of South Africa, Ramaphosa, went and received Xi Jinping when he arrived in South Africa. And remember, Xi Jinping announced that he was coming for the BRICS summit very late, just a couple of days before the summit, I think. And yet the South African president found time to go and receive him. But only the vice president of South Africa went and received Prime Minister Modi when he arrived in Joburg. But there are some reports coming out of South Africa that actually this is denied by the South African government and the Indian government both. Please keep that in mind. But there are media reports from South Africa that a low-level minister was sent to receive Narendra Modi, and Narendra Modi was very upset. He didn't get off the plane until the vice president came and received him. So there is no confirmation about this other than one or two outlets from South Africa. But nevertheless, this third possibility, which I consider as very remote in its explanation of why Xi is not coming to India, is that she fears that Prime Minister Modi might himself go and receive Joe Biden, maybe even receive Macron, and then send a low-level minister, maybe not even the foreign minister, to receive him, and thereby that would be construed as a diplomatic insult. And just to avoid that, Xi is not coming. I don't think that theory is serious, because this could be negotiated beforehand. There's still time. Even today, they can get on the phone. And the Chinese ambassador could reach out to the Ministry of External Affairs and negotiate the protocol as to who is going to come. And if that is the only reason why Xi is not coming, then I think it is a test of Narendra Modi's leadership, whether he'll say, no, we need you, please come, I will be happy to receive you. So I don't think that the third reason is that important. So what does it mean if Xi and Putin both don't come? Number one, the thing that India is trying to avoid, that G20 summit in India does not get fully hijacked by the Ukrainian agenda. That is the US effort to just make that the global issue and the only issue that matters. To avoid that, with the help of the presence of China, the presence of Putin, that could have changed. But now what happens is, it looks like Ukraine's agenda is going to dominate in the absence of the only two leaders who have been challenging G20 to think of other things, and also challenging the view that the US and the West is pushing on Ukraine, blaming the whole war on Russia and demanding that all countries sever economic ties from Russia. So in that sense, Xi and Putin not coming to G20 in a way is an indirect victory for the Ukrainian agenda, I think. Now, second thing is that it puts a lot of pressure on just India alone. So if you were looking at the final communiques of the foreign ministers in G20 and the finance ministers in G20, what India was doing was essentially rehashing what was agreed upon in Bali in the previous G20 summit, which India signed, Russia signed, China also signed. There was a consensus in Bali. So India was essentially repeating the same language on the Russian-Ukraine war, but the West was demanding a stronger statement, and therefore it was being blocked by Russia and China. And so suddenly you had two countries blocking it, and so you were not getting a consensus, and so there was no final communique. So what would have happened this time too, like I had said in my earlier preview to the G20 summit, that perhaps this is a test of Indian diplomacy. Can they get the West not to escalate rhetorically and also get Russia and China to somewhat accept the language of Bali, which they had signed on to, in order to have a final communique coming out of Delhi? So there is the Delhi Declaration of G20 summit. And I just remembered that this will be the first time that Xi or a Chinese leader is missing a G20 summit. So it's not just a small thing, it's a diplomatically an important event. One of the interesting things about G20 is that when people think of G20, they think of it as a global organization dominated by Western countries. And oftentimes, it includes G7. All of G7 is in G20. And it doesn't really speak to the needs and interests of the global South. And that's why India has been emphasizing about bringing Africa in as a full member of G20, and India speaking on behalf of G20, at least during this year at various other G20 meetings. But BRICS, which is seen as speaking for the global South, BRICS is like the G7 of the South, is also part of G20. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, all these 5 countries are part. And now with China and Russia not coming, BRICS becomes a bit more weaker inside G20. So the BRICS agenda inside G20 is diluted by the absence of the leaders of Russia and China, even though this time both Argentina and Saudi Arabia are now part of BRICS, who were part of G20. So if Russian Chinese leaders were here, then perhaps we could have argued that BRICS would have been much more stronger inside G20. So these are some of the consequences, I think, going forward of Xi Jinping not attending. I have to get his name right. It's Xi Jinping and not Xi Jinping. So these are some of the consequences of Xi Jinping not attending G20. I hope yet that there is a final communique, and the fact that the Chinese premier is attending, I mean, there'll be no excitement about any bilaterals, but still some progress could be made on the LAC issue, and hopefully some progress can also be made on finding new language to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, especially talk about how that war is impacting the global South countries who are suffering from food, fertilizer, energy insecurity, and inflation, which is undermining their fledgling economies. So I hope that you found some of these points that I have raised interesting and thought-provoking. And we will talk more about G20 as we get closer to it. I will obviously do a review of the summit, hopefully both in English and Hindi. So until next time, let's follow what's happening much more closely as we go. You will see lots of diplomatic pre-summit summits taking place, and lots of interesting things are definitely going to happen. It's exciting. It's like the Asia Cup. Tomorrow morning, India plays Pakistan. All the best to India. And so it's like that. G20 is, in a way, for those of us who are diplomatic nerds, a kind of a global event. So please, for all of you, please, those of you who are watching for the first time or have been watching but not subscribed, please subscribe to Khanversations, like the video, press the bell icon. Don't forget to share it with others. And those of you who are in a generous mood, do think and consider joining Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host.